Can't you see I'm no good, dear, without you? Take my lips, I want to lose them.
Living in Saratoga and going to Saratoga High School with students that look just like me, I feel like extreme privilege, and I also feel like I live in a bubble because there are people who look just like me, but I know for people like Shalini, you live and you go to a school where it's predominantly white, so maybe you could also like share some stories that you might have, because I know it's hard to be in an area where people don't look like you, so.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually never had a problem until I got to high school, which, because I went to a smaller school up in Palo Alto where it is more ethnically diverse. So I wasn't ever used to feeling as like an outsider ever. But when I got to Los Gatos High School, I remember the first PE class I had, somebody came up to me and asked, "Is this a good Indian accent?" And then started doing the accent. And I was like, there was not one other Indian kid in my class. So I couldn't say, "That's offensive, please stop." You know, because I was personally really hurt by that, because it felt like they were mocking my culture and I didn't really know what to say. And there was no one there to back me up, because the reality is the school's 70% white, you know, and people, it's not so much they're trying to be offensive, more so they don't know it is offensive. And that's, I think, where the biggest problem lies. To keep myself sane, I like to think that they just don't know.
I think it's a good defense.
Yeah, because if I sort of look at the reality and think about, oh, maybe they do know this is offensive, I'd be really angry all the time. And that's not a feeling I like to feel. I don't like to be super angry all the time, which is, you know, I think partially because there is a stereotype of angry Indian women. There is like that stereotype where people look at you and go like, "Oh, do your parents hit you? Oh, does your dad like..." I've been asked really terrible things about my parents and my like family members because of the stereotyping of Muslims and things like that. And it's just, I mean, I've been asked, "Is your dad a terrorist?" once. Like, somebody looked at my dad and he went, like, as it was a joke, but didn't feel like a joke.
Not very funny.
I was like, that's not funny. Like, what part of you thinks that doesn't hurt? You know, like, it's a stinging sort of feeling, like, sort of like, ooh, ouch, you know? And like, the reality is, whether they don't know or they do know, no one's gonna back you up, because they don't want to be that person who, you just don't want to be called out, I guess, is like, you don't want to feel like you are the needle in a haystack. I guess, like, you don't want to be different, which is, I think, what makes it really hard. So, yeah.
I think that's an interesting point, because it's really unfortunate, but it's also really important that as students, you all feel supported and that you have someone to go to when something like that happens, and that we are all agents of change. And so that when someone is nearby and hears somebody say that to somebody else, that you're willing to jump in and stand up and support that person. Like, don't talk to her like that. You know, we have to be willing to take that on as well. Otherwise, yeah, of course, as a teenager, like, you don't want to be singled out. And you also don't want to get really mad about it, and then they see that they got to you, so they go back and tell their friends, "Hey, you can really, you know, make her mad if you say that," and then more people start doing that to you, and it goes on and on. Like, you need a safe place and a safe person that you can go to when things like that happen, to shut that down right away, right? And I think in most schools and in most cases, that's not prevalent. You know, that's not, because you're not even having those conversations about race, let alone putting people in place to support and help students when they're in situations like that. So that's an awareness that needs to come about.
Yeah, something that you brought up super briefly that I kind of wanted to dive deeper into, which is like a very heavy thing to kind of talk about, is the unfortunate common use of the N-word at Los Gatos High School. So, right, I'm a white male, basically as white as you can get, right? So I was at the park last weekend with two of my friends. We were just hanging out, playing guitar. It was about 11 o'clock, and not once but twice, students that I knew from Los Gatos drove by on Shannon and shouted out the N-word at us. And I'm not even a person of color, and it offended me. It made me super upset. And so I guess what I wanted to ask you guys is, like with the use of the N-word, what is the education that needs to be around that so it's not a common term, and just for students to get your point of view as to why this is not an appropriate word that should be used at all, whether on campus or in people's lives?
You know, that one is it's so layered, and it's for me personally, it's probably the single thing that's the most upsetting to me. Well, aside from bad policy and bad legislature and all that other stuff, but and systematic oppression. But why it cuts so deep with me is because you have this prevalent Black culture that is embedding it in our music. They're embedding it in our movies, you know, in film, in scripts, in it. This word is so prevalent. How do you dismantle its power worldwide when you have people within your own ethnic group that are handing it out like candy? And so it's never going to be a situation where people can say, I can say it because I'm Black, and I can put it in my music if I want to, but you can't say it. If you're putting it in your music, and if you're using it, then you also have to take the responsibility that other people are going to say it and other people are going to use it. And so it's twofold, and I don't know how you fix it, because unfortunately it's a word that goes back in our history for as long as the day that we were brought to this country. But at the same time, it's a word that we have embraced within our ethnic group as a term of endearment. Go figure. And so I don't know how you unwind that. And I don't know how you show how utterly offensive it is when you have people within all ethnic groups at this point saying it. But you get mad because a white man says it when you're saying it to your own friends. Like, I don't know how you fix that.
Well, I think we need to teach the difference between punching up and punching down. That's where I think the problem lies. When a person that is not Black says it, it's punching down. It's punching a group that's already been oppressed for so long. And when the word was used against you guys, right? It was used against the Black community to further segregate them from everybody else. So it's different. It's just fundamentally different when a person who is not Black uses that word. They're further, I'm going to repeat myself, they're further oppressing a group that has already been oppressed for the entire history of this country, which is what people don't understand. You know, that's what people don't get. So there is just a difference. And that's sort of how I see it, but do you guys see it differently?
Well, I probably grew up around it more than Kavina did, because, you know, I can't tell you that I didn't say it when I was growing up in South Central LA, because I thought that was how we were supposed to talk to each other. When I finally got old enough my mom was like, you can go outside, they were all talking like that. And so for me, I said, okay, I just join in, because in order for me to fit into this, I have to be this person right here, because there's no way that I was going in the house and saying that, because I probably would have got smacked and rolled about 10 feet back. My mother wasn't going. My family's from the South, so my mother's not going for that. But when I'm outside, I'm totally a different person. I'm that person who has to fit in with those kids, because I felt like I have to go to school with these kids. If I get into a situation where I need to use my fist, these are the ones that are going to stand with me because I relate to them. We grow up together, and I do the same things as them. Now that I'm older, I have a little bit more tolerance for it. I let it wash off my back purpose. It's been very rare that I've been called the N-word, or at least I've never had it called to my face. And I'm thankful that it hasn't happened to me. I could tell you when I was young, I probably would have done what we normally do in the black community. I would have fought because that's all I knew. And now that I'm older, now that I've saw a lot more things, now that I was taught more things, it's easier to just realize I'm not the ignorant one here. You are the person who's saying it to me. The other thing is, I'm with Kavina, is when someone says it's a word of endearment, I tell them to go Google it. And I can find you about 100 people hung in a tree or being beaten and ask them, does that look like it's a term of endearment? Because the last time I checked, a term of endearment means that I'm holding you close together and we all agree with everything. But when you see a black man on the ground and a dog's pulling his clothes or biting him, or a man or a bunch of men in hoods are hanging him, where does that become term of endearment? The other parts I have to look at, and I totally agree. We, as a black community, once we stop using the word, everybody else will. But as long as we use it as a community in our music, in film, in everything, that other cultures can see, the word will never die. But one of the things I do throw at kids when I do talk to them in Los Gatos, when I go to one of the English classes, I ask them to be honest with me. If I am a music producer and you live in the projects and you worry about where your next meal is coming from, but you're very talented either holding a football or being a rapper, and I walk in and say, I'll pay you $10 million, but you got to use the N-word in most of your music, what are you going to say? A lot of kids start out by saying, I wouldn't do it. And I said, let me remind you how poor you are. You have an opportunity to pull your family out of this ghetto and put them into a better situation. That second time through, the whole class raised their hand. So I think that's where we got to really, really tackle the problem of letting people who are empowered to pay us to do these things not use us to make sure that we say the words and have it in our music. My son and I, we go back and forth because I remember when he was first starting, we were starting to travel to Los Gatos for him to go to school. He turned the music on in my car, put it, connected to his phone, and I'm like, turn it down. Either get you some earphones, but we're not doing it in my car. And so we went back and forth with this, and we still do today, go back and forth. My wife is Mexican and German. So my kids aren't full black. My daughter has as blonde as hair as you ever want to see. And if we were walking together, you literally have to look in our face deep to tell that we are father and daughter. Because she does look like me. She has features like me. But if you saw her from a distance, you just think she's a white girl walking with a black man. I'm surprised the police didn't come and handcuff me the day it happened, but I had to take my daughter to Kaiser when she was born. She was having some problems, and she started crying after the shots, and my wife couldn't handle it, and I held on to her. When I started walking for the door, they thought I was stealing a baby. That's how blonde and white my daughter looks. So it's the repeated things that happen to us that because I'm black, I'm not supposed to have a white daughter or white-looking daughter that bothers us. It's like, I feel like we're a disease to people. Like if we move into your community, the house prices go down. I'm struggling with the fact that I go to work every single day. And I try to be the best person that I try to be, and I teach my kids right from wrong. And I'm hard on my kids. I'm very strict with them. And they become really good people. And I still go, what am I doing so wrong when I have great kids? I work. I've been at this job for 22 years. I have the respect of the community. I feel I have the respect of the community, the kids that I work for, the staff that I work for, but yet I'm still seen as an in. I don't understand. And I'm trying to, but it's getting harder and harder, especially when I'm starting to see more black people get shot or beat up by police. And I have my uncle was a 30-year police officer in San Jose. I worked for Eastridge Mall where I was in security for 11 years. And most of the guys that I worked with are cops. So I'm teetering on that line as a black man, you know, and then as trying to support my friends who are cops. And it's hard for me. It's tough every single day as I keep reading and hearing things. I am now, for the first time, afraid of when my son goes out. And when my wife and I go to sleep, that our phones will ring and they tell me that my son's down in the morgue and I have to go identify him. I'm scared. I'm scared every day. And I can't stop him from being a young man. He has to go out and he wants to do things. But I'm afraid for him every single day that he goes out that house.
Something routine can turn into a disaster. You know, my oldest son actually, he graduated a couple of years ago, but he did his undergrad at University of Nevada, Reno. And I instantly, when he decided that's where he was going, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to send this big, my son is pretty muscular, like this big, giant, black 18-year-old to live by himself in Reno. I was a wreck. And so we went down to visit the school. And the first thing I did was count. I had to count to see how many other black people there were there. And finally I got to like 13, 14. I'm like, oh, this isn't so bad. Like there are a lot of black people here. But why? Why do I even have to fear? Why can't he choose whatever school he wants to go to and me not fear that there's going to be some kind of issue for him being out on his own? Or the same thing as Xavier saying, why do I have to be fearful when he says he's going out with his friends? Those are all things that I really wish we didn't have to worry about. And I want to really quickly go back to your question about the N-word. I think it was Oprah Winfrey that said, that when people ask her why she's so offended by the N-word, she tells them that thousands and thousands and thousands of black men and women, when they were hanging from a tree, the very last words that they heard in many cases was the N-word. So how can that possibly be a term of endearment for our community? And so, you know, I think it's great that in that fighting spirit, we said, hey, we're going to take the power away from this word and we're going to use it with each other as a term of endearment. But I wish there was another way that we could have made lemonade out of that lemon. And so it is something that we have to stop doing. I think Xavier is correct. When we stop using it, everybody will stop using it. So sorry to jump in there.
I think in terms of addressing it for students, you have to kind of talk about it sometimes. If you hear someone saying it, your friend says it, hey, why'd you use that word? Sometimes doing that and then they don't have a response back makes them reflect and figure out like, you're right, I probably could have said, hey, dude, rather than using that word. But just talk about it. I've heard it on campus before and I'm an adult and it kind of makes you go, what? Like, did I just hear that? And by the time you think about it and it marinates, it's too late to go address it. And you're like, oh man, I should have said something. So it's just about, even with other racial slurs or, jokes that are inappropriate, you just have to kind of address those things. I think we have this herd mentality where, that someone tells a joke, popular kid, we're all gonna laugh. Like, it's now time, and we're seeing it in media, in movies. You know, there's movies out there now where, you know, it's like, oh yeah, I'm a jock, and they're like, that's not even cool anymore. You know, bullies are not cool anymore. You know, all of those things are starting to kind of not be fun anymore. So you have to start stopping them in their tracks as opposed to internalizing it.
You can't be afraid. And you guys know, you know, any one of you guys that went to Los Gatos knows that I'm not holding my words back. I think at some point you've seen me in action with somebody that has said something, and I'm not. As soon as I hear it, I'm going right to the face, and I'm like, "What are we doing here?" I'm sorry. No, you sorry that you saw me walking up behind you and you didn't think I was near. I can't. I'm wrong if I don't say something right then and there. I am part of the problem if I do not correct right then and there. And I mean like an incident of just something simple where the kid's coming on for sports practice, and I'm out in the back parking lot, and they're listening to some rap, and then all of a sudden the N-word comes out, and then the kid looks at me and turns his radio down. You didn't care that I was here the first time. Why you care now? Is it because I'm looking right at you? Is it because you think I might think you're a racist? I've never considered anybody a racist because they're listening to rap music. It's what you guys like. It's what you want to hear. And you do your thing. But don't try to play it down now that you saw me. But we, as black people, have the power to control that word. And I'm telling you, once we do it, it's a fire. It's like one of these fires that in California that keeps going and just keeps burning acres and acres and acres. But once you got it contained, the fire's out. And if we talk about it, guess what? We start containing it. If we get everyone from another race to say, I hate hearing that word too. Mm-hmm. If we get kids to start saying, when they hear it, you know what? I'm not scared. Why are you talking to them like that? I used to be that person who said, if you're ever with me and someone calls me the N-word, please don't say anything. Because at the end of the day, there might be only one of us fighting here. And I don't want you to be a part of anything that turns to violence because of me. That's how I was. And now I'm so much different about that in the last 6 months, where I'm like, say something. Now you need to tell these people how you really feel, and I got your back.
Yeah, a lot's changed in the last 6 months. I think we've all been pretty quiet about a lot of things. You know, oh, that'll change, or that'll go away, or the pandemic has been so effective in slowing us all down and really making us take note to what's going on around us. And once you see it, you can't deny it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I have a couple of really close friends, actually, and our friendships are very tricky because they consider themselves nationalists, but they don't understand that what's hidden in being a nationalist is some racism. They think that things are fair and equitable, and if you know what people don't have, they don't have based on their own merit. And they say things like, both friends say things like, my parents came to this country and they worked really hard and they got what they have because they worked hard, and they don't see the privilege that comes with them having white skin. And me trying to explain that privilege to them, it falls on deaf ears. But I think that the pandemic and the social unrest that has happened during this time that we've been in quarantine, it's so obvious that there's a problem that if you're still saying there's no privilege involved in that and that things are fair and equitable, then you're just saying that because it's benefiting you. You know, there's no way you can't see what's going on at this point. And you all are our future. You're the ones that are going to be making the laws. You're the ones that are going to be voting and changing the laws. And so bringing awareness at this level is crucial right now. I mean, I'm sure you see what's happening. You see how, everything is being politicized, and everything is about division right now. And that's not going to make a better world for you all. It's not. And so I think, while we're in this time where the focus is on what's going on in our world, it's a call to action. And everybody has a part to play in that action.
Yeah, and to go off what you were saying, I agree with you. I think the pandemic is really making all of us, realize some things. I know some people at school who, used to say the N-word daily, which was terrifying to me, which was horrific. And I used to stop them, but I feel like now that quarantine has come and the death of George Floyd and a lot of people of color, people are starting to realize things. And I think the pandemic is the next step to containing, the usage of racist slurs. So I really think that's effective, and I think containing these racist slurs are starting to become, people are becoming to be more cautious of it. And I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you guys sharing your stories.
All of me, why not take all of me? Can't you see I'm no good, dear, without you? Take my lips, I want to lose them.